I always thought the woods were peaceful until the night I realized something was watching me. The cracking of twigs, the rustle of leaves, and that faint, deliberate breathing behind my tent made me question every decision I'd ever made about camping alone. By the time the night truly fell, I knew there was no going back. Before we dive into this chilling story, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video, and leave a comment. You won't want to miss the shocking ending, and I promise it will stay with you long after you've turned off the screen. It started innocently enough. I had planned a weekend escape into the forest, craving solitude and a break from the constant buzz of city life. I pitched my tent in a small clearing near a creek, surrounded by towering pines whose needles whispered in the wind. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin, the kind of scent that makes your chest tighten in anticipation. It was quiet, almost too quiet. After setting up camp, I wandered along the trail, listening to the soft gurgle of the creek and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. I felt a strange sense of isolation, but it was peaceful. I'd always loved the outdoors, and being alone didn't scare me. Not yet. As darkness fell, I returned to my tent and built a small fire. The flames crackled and popped, casting long, dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. I thought about roasting marshmallows, but something in the air made my stomach twist. The forest felt alive, but not in the way I liked. There was an intentness to it, like someone was silently observing me from the shadows. I shrugged it off. As nerves, I crawled into my sleeping bag, the firelight flickering against the fabric. The temperature had dropped sharply, and I could see my breath clouding in the cold air. I closed my eyes, hoping the fatigue would carry me into sleep, but the night had other plans. It began with a sound, a faint snapping of a twig, distant but deliberate. My eyes snapped open. Nothing. I told myself it was a deer or some other woodland creature, but then there was another sound, closer this time, a low rustle brushing against the outer edge of the clearing. I froze. The logical part of my mind reminded me that I was alone, and nothing in the woods hunts humans casually, but my gut said otherwise. I unzipped my tent, just slightly, peering into the darkness. The fire had burned down to embers, and the forest beyond was a sea of black, broken only by the silhouette of swaying branches. And I thought I saw it. A shadow moving between the trees, too large and deliberate to be a deer. My heart rate spiked, and my hands trembled as I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light. I stuffed the image out of my mind and tried to sleep, telling myself it was just nerves. But then came the whispers. At first, I couldn't make them out. Soft, almost like the wind bending through the pine needles. But soon, the words began to form. They weren't clear, but they were deliberate. Footsteps circled my tent, slow and measured, stopping abruptly at intervals. Every crack of a branch sent jolts of panic through me. I was wide awake now, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time distorted in the dark. I felt eyes on me constantly, pressing down like a weight. They winded, leaving the night eerily still. Then, just as I thought I could handle it no longer, I heard it clearly. A deliberate knock on a tree trunk, sharp and singular. Not once, not twice. Again and again, like someone was testing my resolve, counting my breaths, measuring my fear. I couldn't stay in the tent any longer. My instincts screamed at me to run, but every muscle refused to cooperate. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the darkness, and shone it toward the tree line. Nothing. The shadows held nothing but the shapes of trees. Yet the air felt thick. Suffocating. A low, almost imperceptible hum began, vibrating through the ground beneath me. I realized the sound wasn't random. It was close, moving, and directed at me. Suddenly, I heard my name, clear as day, whispered just beyond the edge of the firelight. I froze. My name, uttered in a voice I didn't recognize. It somehow intimately familiar. My chest tightened, and every instinct told me to flee. I didn't know who or what was out there. But it canalled me, and it wanted me to know it was there. I backed toward the creek, thinking the flowing water might offer some comfort. The sound of the current should have been soothing, but the whispers followed, and then a shadow stepped into view. A figure. Talentine standing motionless among the trees. I couldn't make out its features, only the way it seemed to absorb the moonlight, darker than the night around it. My rational mind screamed that it must be a trick of the eyes, yet every hair on my body stood on end. I retreated to my tent, fumbling to zip it shut. My flashlight flickered, then died. Total darkness enveloped me, and the figure didn't move. It simply waited. I could hear breathing now, slow and deliberate, circling my tent. My hands shook as I tried to light a match, my heart hammering against my ribs like a drum of warning. And then I felt it, a presence brushing against the outside of the tent, deliberate, probing. I couldn't see it, couldn't take confronted, but I knew it was there. Watching, waiting. Time passed differently in that dark cocoon of fear. Minutes stretched into hours, every rustle of a branch like a scream in my mind. I whispered my own name, hoping it would remind me I was real, human, safe. But the forest didn't respond. Only the soft, deliberate crunch of footsteps answered. By the time dawn began to creep into the sky, painting the clearing in pale gray light, the presence was gone. No footprints, no signs of intrusion, only the faint scent of damp earth and pine. My fire had burned out, leaving a circle of blackened ash. And yet, I knew what I had seen wasn't imagination. I had been followed, observed, toyed with, and I didn't escape unscathed. Something in those woods had marked me. That first night in the forest was just the beginning. What happened next would make me question my sanity, my judgment, and everything I thought I knew about fear. But that story is for the next part. The morning after that first night, I tried to convince myself it had been a nightmare. The sunlight spilling through the trees felt almost comforting, painting the forest in warm hues. But the unease lingered, a tight knot in my chest I couldn't shake. Every rustle, every shadow, even the gentle flow of the creek seemed to whisper warnings I couldn't ignore. I packed up my sleeping bag and checked my gear, telling myself I'd hike a little deeper into the forest, somewhere that felt less watched. I kept my flashlight handy, though the sun had just risen. The further I walked along the narrow, winding trails, the more I noticed subtle signs that something wasn't right. Broken branches at unnatural angles, disturbed patches of earth, and footprints that didn't match anything I'd expect from local wildlife. By midday, I stumbled upon an old campsite, abandoned but eerily intact. Rusted cans, tattered blankets, and a tent frame that had long since collapsed. The place had been deserted for years, yet it felt alive with a presence that made my skin crawl. I found a small carving on a tree near the site. A crude figure, almost humanoid, with scratches surrounding it in what looked like deliberate patterns. My stomach churned. Whoever had been here before me had left a warning. I tried to shake it off and continued hiking, hoping to clear my mind. The sun climbed higher, but shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally beneath the dense canopy. Ten primera, ie, ardi. It a voice, faint, almost melodic, calling my name again. I froze There was no one around. My heart pounded, and sweat ran down my back, despite the cool morning air. I told myself I was imagining things. I wasn't prone to hallucinations, but the forest had a way of twisting perception. The sunlight flickered through the trees like a strobe, and I began to feel dizzy, disoriented. I caught glimpses of movement, fleeting, just at the edge of my vision. And each time I turned, nothing was there. By late afternoon, I realized I had wandered into a denser part of the forest. The air smelled heavier here, damp and metallic, like iron. Branches clawed at my arms, leaving scratches that stung. Then I heard the snapping of twigs behind me. Not random, not like an animal running deliberate steps, matching my pace. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the dimming light, but saw nothing. The whispers returned, this time more insistent, closer. I could make out fragmented words, like commands or warnings. Leave. Now, follow. The sound twisted my stomach into knots. Panique surged, and I started running blindly, crashing through underbrush, tripping over roots and rocks. My flashlight swung wildly, illuminating nothing but trees, shadows, and that relentless feeling that something was keeping pace with me. I stumbled into a clearing and froze. There, at the center, was a figure taller than any man, impossibly thin, face obscured in shadow. Its movements were slow, deliberate, and it didn't flinch when I shined my flashlight at it. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs refused to move. My mind screamed at me to stay calm, to reason, but reason had abandoned me hours ago. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if examining me. I noticed then that it wasn't entirely solid, like a shadow given form, darker than darkness itself. My fear was immediate, visceral. I wanted to close my eyes, to pretend it wasn't there, but I couldn't look away. Every instinct screamed that I was standing on the edge of something. Ancient, watching, patient. I backed toward the tree line, trying to put some distance between us, but it mirrored my movements. Every step I took, it took one as well. The whispers escalated into murmurs, unintelligible but filled with malice. My chest burned from rapid breathing, and my hands shook violently. I grabbed a stick from the ground, barely conscious of what I was doing, but it felt useless against whatever this was. Suddenly, the figure moved closer. Not fast, but with an inevitability that chilled me to the bone. I tripped over a root and fell hard to the ground. The forest was silent, except for the soft crunch of its footsteps approaching. I could feel its presence over me. Heavy, oppressive, like the air itself was closing in. My flashlight rolled away, casting the clearing into darkness. And then I heard it speak. A voice low and echoing, resonating from nowhere and everywhere. You shouldn't be here. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a threat. It was a statement of fact. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly into the trees, branches whipping against my face, roots clawing at my ankles. The whispers followed, growing louder, pressing against my mind like ice-cold fingers. Hours passed in what felt like moments. I had no idea where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. The forest seemed endless, every turn leading to more shadows, more signs that I was being hunted. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of the figure among the trees. Always watching, always following, never rushing, but never losing me either. Finally, exhausted, I stumbled into another clearing, one that looked strangely familiar. My old campsite, my tent, fire pit, and gear were all exactly as I had left them that morning. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. The air was thick, heavy, as if charged with anticipation. And then I realized the figure wasn't here, not in the clearing. Not yet. The forest held its breath, waiting, and I knew, instinctively, that this was just another test. The creature, whatever it was, had allowed me a brief reprieve to catch my breath, to hope. But hope was dangerous here. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper reminded me that I was being watched, studied, and possibly judged. I returned to my tent, sat by the dying embers of the fire, and tried to make sense of what had happened. The rational part of me insisted it was a hallucination. Stress, exhaustion, isolation. But every instinct screamed otherwise. Something had been following me, tracking me, and had the ability to manipulate the forest itself. I could feel its presence in every rustle, every beam of light filtering through the trees. As night fell again, I realized that sleep was impossible. The first night had been a warning. The second night, Terreltis, had only begun. I could feel the forest closing in, the whispers growing louder, and the figure watching me, patient and unseen. I had no weapons, no plan, no allies, only the forest, the shadows, and that ever-present sense of being hunted. And I knew, deep down, that the night ahead would change everything. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was a confrontation with something that defied logic, something ancient and patient, something that wanted me to understand fear in its purest form. Night fell again, thicker this time, as if the forest itself had swallowed the sun. Shadows stretched unnaturally, weaving through the trees like living things. I could hear every crack of a branch, every distant hoot of an owl, but beneath it all was something else. A low, constant hum, vibrating through the earth, through me, like the forest was alive and breathing around me. I stayed close to my tent, the small circle of dying embers, barely lighting the clearing. My flashlight was dead, my nerves shredded. I could feel the presence before I saw it. An oppressive weight, pressing down on my chest, making every breath a struggle. The whispers had returned, louder now, more insistent, weaving between the trees, around me, inside me. Ten primera, sa doble italiano. Not in the distance this time, but at the edge of the firelight, its form darker than darkness itself. The tall, thin figure stood perfectly still, its head tilting in a way that made me feel like I was being examined. Every instinct screamed to run, but I was frozen. Unable to move, scream. The forest had trapped me in its silent, suffocating grip, and the creature knew it. It began moving slowly toward me, deliberate steps, the crunch of dead leaves punctuating the silence. The whispers became words, now audible, now unmistakable. You shouldn't have come. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, landing hard on the damp earth. Panic surged through me, raw and terrifying. I scrambled to my feet, clawing at the ground as I tried to retreat to the far edge of the clearing. The figure moved with an inevitability that chilled me to the core. I could see the faint glimmer of its eyes, blacker than the night, fixed on me with an intelligence that was inhuman. I realized, in a sickening moment of clarity, that this was not an animal, not a person, something else, something ancient, patient, and utterly indifferent to the rules of this world. I ran. Branches lashed my face, roots tore at my ankles, and my lungs burned with each frantic breath. The figure followed, never fast, never reckless, but never losing ground. Every step I took, it matched. Every turn, every desperate attempt to hide, it anticipated. My mind screamed for a plan, for logic, but there was none. The forest had become a maze of shadows, a trap designed for fear itself. I dove into the creek, the icy water shock in my body, hoping it would slow it down or mask my presence. But even under the water, I could feel it. The hum beneath the forest floor seemed to penetrate the stream, wrapping around me like invisible fingers. I surfaced, gasping, coughing, and caught sight of the figure at the bank, perfectly still, watching me. It didn't chase, it didn't blink. It simply waited, patient and calculating. Hours passed. I couldn't tell how many. The forest shifted around me. Sounds became distorted. The whispers turned into faint laughter, cruel and hollow. I stumbled out of the creek and back into the clearing, drenched and shivering. My mind teetered on the edge of sanity. I had to do something. Anything. But what could I do against a being that seemed to exist beyond fear itself? I decided to confront it. I grabbed a broken branch, the only semblance of a weapon, and shouted, my voice cracking. What do you want from me? The forest fell silent. The shadows seemed to lean in, listening. And then, in a voice like wind through dead trees, it answered, to remind you that you are never alone here. The ground beneath me trembled slightly, and I felt a cold brush across my face, like fingertips made of shadow. My mind screamed in terror. Every instinct, every thought, begged me to run, but I couldn't. The forest was alive, and it had claimed me as part of its endless game, and then it was gone. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted into the darkness, leaving the clearing empty, but the feeling remained. A weight, a presence, an inevitability. I could hear the whispers still, softer now, receding, promising that this was not over, that it would return, or that I would never leave. I packed my gear with trembling hands as dawn crept over the horizon. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow suspicious. I moved quickly, following the trail that had seemed familiar the day before. But the forest had changed. The paths twisted unnaturally. Trees shifted subtly when I wasn't looking. I realized that no matter how far I walked, the woods had absorbed me. I was a part of it now, marked and watched. When I finally stumbled out of the forest hours later, the sunlight felt alien, almost painful. Primera looked back, half expecting to see the figure among the trees, but there was nothing. Only the silent, rustling canopy and the faint hum beneath the earth. I told myself I would never return, that I would tell no one, but the memory is relentless. The whispers, the weight, the eyes. They haunt me, even now, in my apartment. I hear the faint rustle of leaves when no wind blows. I learned a hard lesson that weekend. Some places are alive in ways we cannot understand. Some shadows are patient, waiting for the right moment to remind us that the world is not as safe as we think. And some presences do not forget. If you ever find yourself camping alone, remember this story. Listen to the whispers. Watch the shadows. Respect the forest. Not just for what grows there, but for what waits in the darkness. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more chillin' true horror tales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Like this video if it gave you good, and leave a comment telling me what part terrified you the most. Trust me, you won't want to miss what is coming next.